All right, what's going on, guys? Simple Sports back with another episode for you. Really quick, I want to talk some NBA stuff, but I want to give you a quick heads up on what we got going on for the week. Finally got some more free time with work, so I'm going to go to a more regular schedule, hopefully a permanent regular schedule. Try to do 5 episodes this week. It's going to be tough Thursday and Friday given my work schedule, but we'll figure it out. Might have to do 2 recordings and just upload them at a later date. But nonetheless, today I want to talk about the Eastern Conference playoffs. So for the week, let me give you a quick preview. Today I'm going to talk about the Eastern Conference. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the West. And then Wednesday I have a really juicy topic that I'm working on getting some information put together for. And I'm going to talk about how LeBron James is, in fact, obviously one of the greatest players ever, but is also, in his own way and by his own doing, by his own hands, going to hurt his own legacy in a very indirect manner. So stay tuned for that on Wednesday. I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. Might give a little bit of a teaser in a minute coming up when I talk about the Eastern Conference playoffs, but you'll see on Wednesday. Just stay tuned for that. Stick around for that. It's going to be very nice. But for now, let's get right into it. Eastern Conference playoffs. I have 7 teams that I think could make it to the finals out of the East and West combined. 4 in the East, 3 in the West. Okay. Today we want to talk about the East. Tomorrow, like I said, we'll talk about the West, and then on Wednesday, come back for a very intriguing video on LeBron James. But let's get right into it. So obviously the Cavs, okay? The Cavs are number 1 in most people's eyes. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion like most people do, but I do think they are the favorites, slim favorites, but the favorites nonetheless. So let's not spend too much time on them. Instead, let's go to the other 3 teams that I have. Number 1, Toronto. Okay, Toronto Raptors. Now, I am no believer in the baby dinosaurs against the Cavaliers, but they do have a shot. Okay, and I'm not 100% counting them out when I say I'm not a believer. And it's really for one reason. The gap between the Cavs and second place from last year has closed considerably, right? The real question is, and what will determine if they actually can beat Toronto, is how big was the gap initially, and how much has it closed? The reason there's no answer to that just yet is because we're not in the playoffs yet, and I don't put too much stock in the NBA regular season in terms of who can and can't beat who in the playoffs, because it just simply never pans out that way. Or I shouldn't say never, but usually doesn't pan out that way. And more importantly, in my opinion, I think in most people's opinion, and definitely in my opinion, the gap has been closed enough so that the Raptors won't get swept again. I don't think you're going to see some 4-game sweep domination, just pure dominance from the Cavs against the Raptors like we have seen in the past. But again, we don't know until if and when they meet in the playoffs. That'll be determined then. But based on what we saw in their last matchup in the regular season, I don't think they can beat the Cavs in the 7-game series. Do I think they could take them, say, 7 games or like a really close 6? Sure. I don't think they inevitably will beat them, or I should say ultimately will beat them. But they certainly have a shot. I'm not counting them totally out, but I think Toronto can beat them. I just think the Cavs have the best player, at least in the East, by a mile. It's not even close, and I think that's just going to be too much for the Raptors to overcome. They don't look that impressive to me. They kind of remind me of the Rockets in the East. I think they're good. I think they're a really good team, but are they good enough to beat Golden State out West? I don't think so. Not a healthy Golden State anyway. And I think much the same can be said about the Raptors. Are they really good enough to beat the Cavs? Personally, I think they are, but I don't think they can overcome LeBron James, and therefore I think the Cavs will end up winning in the end. But I do think it's going to be a close series if and when they do happen to match up. Second on my list is Philly, and I know Philly had sort of an iffy schedule as of late on this winning streak. And again, I don't put a whole lot of stock into the regular season, but a win's a win. I can't take that away from them. They have looked good against those teams, but again, take it with a grain of salt. The competition hasn't been necessarily the best. But if you ask me, top to bottom, they have the capability, at least on paper, to beat the Cavs. And it'll largely, obviously, depend on Embiid coming off the injury. But in addition to his play, the inexperience also has to be considered. They are a young team with two young stars, virtually both rookies. And they're definitely both rookies in terms of the postseason. So I think that is going to be their ultimate downfall. I think if you take all of that stuff out of the equation and strictly look at them on the basketball court, I certainly think they could beat the Cavs. But I think in those key moments when you need some mental help, when you need to play the game with your mind, most importantly, when it's a minute left and you're down 3 or up 5 and you need to make sure you close out the deal, I think that's when you're going to see the fall of the Sixers versus the Cavs. But outside of that, I think they are certainly capable of beating them. The Cavs will have zero answer for a healthy Joel Embiid in the interior, both scoring and on the glass. And I think, I think as far in terms of basketball, I think the biggest thing is the space on the floor. The spacing is not going to be there for them, mostly because Simmons can't shoot. He's not a jump shooter. And granted, it's not an issue in terms of him scoring the basketball, but it does make it more difficult when you have that one less element to use to your advantage, in addition to the fact that it's one less thing for the Cavs have to worry about with their porous, terrible, piss-poor defense that they play. They play no defense. They might as well just give the other team 2 points on whatever their percentage is. Every time they get the ball on a rebound, they should just add in that percentage and say, you know what, this time we'll give you guys a 2 or a 3, because the Cavs just don't play defense. They might as well play half court and just, play it where you clear it behind the 3-point line, because there's no defense to be played. They're not running up and down the court. They are, but they're not good defensively, and I think that's going to be a problem for them throughout the postseason, and it might lead to them not making it to the finals. I think offensively they don't have any issues other than just having off nights. And the one thing I will say is they do live and die by the 3. And on nights when they aren't hitting it, that's when you see the score get a little out of proportion. It's because they're not hitting threes. But really, what else are they going to do? So I don't think that they offensively will have any issues, but defensively they're going to struggle. I just don't think that the Sixers will be experienced enough in those key moments when you really, really need that veteran leadership, those answers mentally from someone who's been there, done that, and knows how to get it done. I don't think they're going to have that. I mean, JJ Redick is a vet, but he's not that type of a guy in terms of on the court production. Like, he's not a star. They're not going to put the ball in his hands and say, go take us home, take us to the promised land. So I think that's going to be ultimately their downfall. And then finally, Boston. And I say Boston mostly because I love Kyrie. Who knows if he will play? I'm assuming he will. And my guess is that he will. He's just trying to get to 100% or as close to 100% as he can for their matchup, potentially with the Cavaliers or whoever else they may have eventually down the road. As far as I know, he's going to be out at least the first series or at least a couple of games of the first series, but I don't know that to be a fact, so don't take that for a fact. But for me, it's personal. And if you would have asked me at the beginning of the season, I did say this at the beginning of the season, but the story of the year for me, for 2017-18 sports, football, basketball, you name it, the story of the year for me would be Kyrie leaving the teacher, leaving the master, becoming the master, and then being the last man standing in the East over LeBron James in the conference finals. You cannot write a better story for the NBA for this year, I don't think. I think that is the one story for this year that can't be topped by anything else, unless there was just some magical run by like the Sixers that led to a championship or something like that. Outside of that, I think this would be the most intriguing story. Kyrie and the Celtics taking down LeBron and the Cavs. And let me make this very, very clear. LeBron James cannot lose to the Celtics, especially led by one Kyrie Irving. It will not look good for his legacy, okay? And that's one of the things I want to talk about on Wednesday, how LeBron James is not only one of the greatest players ever, but also caused his own demise in terms of being a champion again. I want to talk about that on Wednesday. So, as I said, come back for that as well. The Kyrie's decision was heavily criticized and scrutinized, and quite frankly, a lot of people made it seem like they disliked him over that fact. And I personally thought it was a great decision for him to take control of his career. So I'm pulling for him and the Celtics on a personal level, even though I'm a Lakers fan. That sounds so terrible to say. But just from a stories perspective, I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories. I like to read good stories. And this is one that I think is going to be epic, especially if it pans out the way that I think it could. Not that it will, but it certainly could go that way. I love the idea that Kyrie beating LeBron in the playoffs. I said that at the beginning of the year, so if it does happen, you guys can just call me a guru because thank you. I did call it. It would be very, very interesting, and it would put an interesting twist on LeBron James' legacy. I'm very interested to see how people would discuss that loss, specifically to one Kyrie Irving. I think the criticism against him to start the season was absolutely ridiculous, largely from a bunch of LeBron supporters mostly. And my thing is, LeBron didn't have a LeBron on his team as he was to Kyrie, right? But he did the exact same thing that Kyrie did, which was make a decision for the betterment of his career. And that was the move to Miami. And so the thing that bothers me is, why is Kyrie's decision any different from the one that LeBron James made? And the question I have for people out there is it because my theory, I guess, and again, part of what I'm going to talk about on Wednesday is I think it's because Kyrie may have taken away the only chance both this year and for the rest of LeBron James' career to win a title, possibly. That's what I think. And it's why I think you see such hate for Kyrie, or at least you saw it in the beginning of the year. Why do you leave LeBron James? And that's a stupid decision. You're going to regret that and all that nonsense. And I also think that's why you see such an overbearing support for LeBron James from his fans and from the media. Everything he does is the greatest thing ever. All you hear about on FS1 and ESPN is how close is he to Jordan? Did this put him over Jordan in the all-time ranking? Is he the greatest of all time? Is he the second greatest of all time? What does he have to do to pass Jordan as the greatest of all time? Every little thing that he does. And for example, the consecutive games with 10 or at least 10 points, and it was something close to like 900 games. I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's like 866 or 867 or somewhere in that neighborhood. And of course, it's extremely impressive. I don't want to diminish that at all. But my thing is, isn't it also expected? Like, if I would have told you Kobe only had like 200 games of at least 10 points in a row, you'd be a little shocked by that, right? But if I told you he had 5, 6, 7, 800 in a row with at least 10 points, that's expected to me. You never, at no point do you go to sleep and wake up and look at the look at the box score and not expect to see LeBron James have scored at least 20 to 25 points, even on an off night. Every now and then, I think a couple of weeks ago or a couple of games ago, he had like 12 or like 15 or 18 points. Last night, he was like 5 for 24 from the field, 5 for 20 from the field, something like that. But you don't see that often. You just don't. And it's just, he could roll out of bed and score. I remember hearing a story about Klay Thompson 2 or 3 days ago. I think, what was I listening to? Oh, the KD and Bill Simmons podcast. He was talking about Klay Thompson, how Klay Thompson missed practice the night before he scored 60. LeBron could roll out of bed and score 20 points without stretching, It's just, my point is, it's obviously a great feat. I just don't get all the show and pomp and circumstance behind it all. Like, I thought it was pretty much expected, and that doesn't mean you can't you can't celebrate something that is expected to happen. You certainly can. I just don't understand the magnitude of, like, it's just not that big of a deal. At least I don't think so. Listen, I couldn't score 10 points in 800 games, but I just don't see why that is so impressive for someone who you expect. I mean, you go out tonight and you'd think, you would not be surprised at all if you woke up tomorrow and LeBron had 50 points in the last game. That wouldn't surprise you, right? He's LeBron James. So why is it that 10 points at least? Listen, the number of games is certainly a huge deal, but and to do that for 800 plus, almost 900 games consecutively is a huge accomplishment. I take nothing away from that. I just don't understand. Like, that doesn't put him over Michael Jordan. He broke Michael Jordan's record, so it's not like it was some unforeseen. If this was like, if the record was 200 or 300 and he had close to 900, now you're telling me something different. It's not that big of a deal. Not to me anyway. If you want to put stock in it, you go for it. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. And we've seen other superstars lose that streak for one reason or another, whether it be injury or an ejection or just a really, really bad night. Whatever the case may be, and again, I take nothing away from that. It is a huge accomplishment. I just think LeBron's fans need something to help elevate him above Jordan, and they're picking any and everything they can for ammo. Sorry, guys, but as impressive as this is, it's a grain of sand on the beach to me. So, tomorrow we talk about the West, and then, like I said, Wednesday, stay tuned for the big one. Thursday and Friday, I don't know exactly what I'll talk about. Maybe some NFL stuff. I'll probably record another video late tonight or maybe tomorrow as well to cover for Thursday and Friday. I want to try to do this 5 days a week now that I have a little more time to get some stuff done. But that's all I got for today. I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.